You have a TV?
No. I just like to read the TV guide. Read the TV guide. You don't need a TV.
Television addict! Television addict! Television addict!
Happy Friday, everybody. It's Ken Reed here, your TV guidance counselor, with a bonus episode this week on the show where we talk about the television that influenced us and the television, in some cases, people made in the classic era of television. I am always happy to do extra episodes. I have a new episode every Wednesday, as you may or may not know, if this is the first time you've checked out the show. But occasionally, I am lucky enough that some interesting and fascinating people either come through town here in the Boston area, or I'm in LA or somewhere doing shows, and I'm able to record more than one episode in a week. And you, the listener, are able to reap the rewards of that time. And today, you guys are in for a real treat. My guest is the one and only Miss Olivia Dabo. She is a voiceover actress, musician. She is so smart and funny and just charming, and I had such a great time talking to her. I wanted to have her on the show for a long time, but she's super busy. When I was in LA, it didn't work out the last time, and I was really happy to see that she was coming to Massachusetts to do a massive con, which is a little comic convention. I guess they're not comic conventions anymore. They're sort of a popular cultural convention these days out in the central part of the state, and I was doing some stuff for the convention anyway, and so it just worked out. It was a wonderful moment of serendipity, and again, you guys are going to really be happy that happened, because this is a super fun episode. She is a fascinating person, and I just had such a great time talking to her, and it's probably evident I could have talked to her for 12, 13 hours. Well, no, that's an exaggeration. Maybe more like 9 or 10 hours. We got into almost everything she's done, from Conan and the Destroyer to the Wonder Years, of course, Justice League, and one of my favorite things, Really Weird Tales with the SCTV people. It's a really, really fun conversation. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy today's episode of TV Guidance Counselor with my guest, the one and only Miss Olivia Dabo.
TV is my friend, and it has been always there for me in time of need.
And my guest today, Olivia Dabo, how are you?
I'm really good, Ken.
My radio intro was very ridiculous.
TV guidance counselor? You have to break that down for me.
Well, so TV Guide,
right?
The television, perennial television magazine, which your character references in Greed.
Greedy.
Yeah, Greedy.
Does she?
Yeah, she.
Remind me.
Give
me a line reading.
They all stake her out because they think that she's like cheating on. They think she's having an affair with Kirk Douglas's character, and she comes in the rain, and she goes, "I went out to get him this TV guide because he likes to have it on Mondays."
TV guide because JoJo likes the TV guide.
Which is so that is the Bible for people who watch television here, and so the pun being the TV guidance counselor. We talk about what people watched on television.
All right. Okay. So I get the whole genesis of where that comes from. That's brilliant. I've done actually a couple of interviews for TV Guide.
You were on the cover once as well.
What? No way.
Yes, with
Look
the Wonder
at you,
Years
Mr.
cast.
Trivia buff.
Yeah, it was it was in April 1989.
Oh my gosh.
It was
Get out
it was a paste up. You guys were like in the lower corner of the of the TV Guide.
And then we made a cover of Mad Magazine. I was actually saying today, I think I was here in Boston doing a panel, and we were talking about the Wonder Years, and I knew that we'd really made it when the Mad Magazine character, the toothless Mad Magazine, or like the one tooth
Alfred E. Newman.
When we kind of Mad Magazine had to take on their take on the Wonder Years and what would transpire, years after, and what all these individual characters would grow up to be. I think Karen was going to be she became like a Greenpeace whale watcher, or.
See, I thought they would have gone the Alex P. Keaton route and made her like a yuppie who was like the rest of the baby boomers did.
Exactly. I mean, I think they probably could have gotten a little bit less on the head with it, hit it less on the head and been, maybe more kind of gone against type.
How weird is it to see like a caricature drawn of a character you're playing in a comic book? Like that's gonna be very strange.
Yeah, really, it's really, really strange. It's just weird to see yourself just playing. You're just weird to see yourself as a caricature, period, because I have rather protruding teeth anyway, so whenever I've seen...
They really exaggerate that?
I basically become a rabbit, they turn me into a rodent or a rabbit.
Well, that's very disrespectful of them.
That's rude.
That's just wrong. I shouldn't
it's
do
wrong.
that. Yeah,
Yes.
and it's cheap. It's cheap laughs. And it is
unacceptable.
So pre-Wonder Years, we were just kind of talking before we were recording, and the first thing you did was Bolero, which is a crazy movie.
Crazy.
Post 10, Bo Derek.
Yeah.
And you were just on the beach and they discovered you?
Yeah, it's the weirdest thing. It was one of these kismet kind of, I guess, the beginning of my destiny, getting getting on the treadmill of my
journey to stardom.
Yes, and I mean, literally, it's like one of these just crazy stories where I literally was discovered by a talent scout. Now, it's not like I'd never done anything before. I'd done, I studied at the Royal Ballet in London.
Because you come from a performing family.
Yeah, and I think my parents really made a concerted effort to kind of, environmentally surround both my brother and I in kind of creative circuits, have us speaking foreign languages at a young age and, trying to educate us. And then we moved to Taos, New Mexico, French having been my first language, and then went to Taos, New Mexico, and so I knew how to read and write in French, but not as well in English. And
French was your first language?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And your parents are both English, correct?
Yes, they are.
So they wanted you to learn French first and English second?
Well, yeah, I spoke English, obviously, but my first real language in terms of being,
education-wise?
Yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting.
The whole vernacular and all of that, yeah. And so then when we moved to Taos, New Mexico, I had quite a lot of catching up to do.
That's a big change.
Yeah, it's a big change, but luckily I caught on really well, and I started kind of going into spelling bees and stuff like that. Because I think I felt this immense pressure to just really get my act together and know how to spell and switch gears, because otherwise socially I would be probably completely inept.
Yeah. It was a survival thing.
It was bad enough that I was like literally a minority to this school that I was going to. It was completely all Hispanic and American Indian, and it was great in hindsight now, looking back at it, because it gave me I learned a great lesson, which is that I know what it's like to feel like a minority,
right.
Which most people, other than being a minority, like conventional minority.
Right. Most people that complain about that are probably not actually the people who could complain about that. Like,
exactly.
Well, I'm the minority now. It's like, no. You're not, yeah. Let's move you to a border town in New Mexico when your first language is French.
Right, absolutely. Let's really confuse this child.
Yeah,
She's not an army brat, but she sure could be.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I digressed a lot from Bolero, but what I was saying is I was discovered by a talent scout, but it's
in
not
New
like
Mexico.
In on the beach, actually, in Marina Del Rey. But I had been doing school plays, and I'd studied at the Royal Ballet. So the first thing I did, kind of as a performer, was this thing called Me and My Teddy Bear at the Albert Hall when I was 4. So that was like the first.
That's a big room.
Yes, it's a big room to fill. Yeah, exactly. And when I moved to New Mexico, I did like Fiddler on the Roof and Guys and Dolls and, a bunch of musicals and, started getting into Shakespeare festivals. I went to a magnet school in Pacoima Junior High, which I was like bussed from Marina Del Rey to the valley.
Right.
And so.
The exotic valley.
Yeah, the North Valley of Chatsworth.
Did you feel like an outsider, other even there? Because it's
I've
like
always
such a weird
felt like an outsider, Ken.
Yeah.
I mean, I love. That's why I think I support the underdog. I'll go into restaurants and see waiters, or actually, more importantly, busboys or busgirls, and I magnetically connect with them because I kind of know their whole inner life and what their entire plight has been up until that moment, because it's I'm one of these people who's always been a fish out of water, and I think has had to subsequently adapt.
Right, you're studying how people act so you can kind of fit in that way, which I mean,
exactly
makes sense with how good you are at accents, and because you really have to probably observe them more and absorb it to sort of be like, okay, this is how you do that thing that they're doing that is not what I do naturally.
Yeah, I mean, I became a mimic at a very young age, and I feel like I want to kind of correlate this back to Bolero.
We'll get to Bolero eventually.
We did actually have
all the Bolero
here.
fans that tuned in were like, I thought they were going to talk about Bolero here. It's the Bolero
Exactly.
podcast.
You're like, when are they going to get back to this topic? Yeah, so I came from sort of like a family of mimicry. I mean, I would always sit around a table and watch my father, do Auntie Betty, and, Uncle Rafe, and, they would all try and outdo each other. Nobody could actually get a word in edgewise because everybody was mimicking everybody. And, because my father was a musician and then I became a musician, it kind of was in our blood. It's like prick up your ears. Our ears were always pricked up and... open listening to. We had the capacity, and I've really honed in on that to sort of like, I can have a conversation with you in a restaurant, hear what's playing musically on the open mic, whether it's Muzak or a song that's playing, name that tune in about 2 seconds, and hear the conversations going on around the room.
You're breaking it all up into pieces as it goes along.
Yeah, it's annoying sometimes because
are you listening to me? No, I get that too. That kind of thing. Be like, you're eavesdropping, aren't you, right now? Because you can kind of tell that like you have one ear. But I mean, I do that all the time because it's as someone who likes comedy, the weird things you hear people say is always hilarious.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially if it ends up becoming more interesting than the conversation you're having.
Yes.
And then the person that you're having the conversation with, you're like, could you hear what that person just said?
And they're like, well, I was telling something to you instead, so no, I didn't.
And then you really offend the person you're having lunch with. But yeah, so when I got discovered on the beach, and I was in Marina del Rey, I like a cat, I had already had 9 lives and lived in all sorts of places. And for whatever reason, the role that this French photographer, Claudia Albuquerque was her name, which is kind of ironic because I lived in Taos, New Mexico, which was a 2-hour drive from Albuquerque,
and
New Mexico.
French.
And she stopped me. She's like, you have this, you are an actress. What do you do? And I said, I'm an actress. I'm body surfing right now, but if you really must know, yes, I do dabble in it. And then she goes, because, I have this friend, Jean Derrick, he's making this movie, he's married to Bo Derrick.
Which sounds like just the most made up thing anyone would ever say to some kid on the beach.
Exactly. And I'm just like, look, lady, you want to get on with it? What's your point?
Yeah, what do you want from me?
Exactly. And she's like, this is role for a gypsy, and I can see you have a dark eyes, but I know you are blonde, but... you could play a dirty little gypsy.
What a compliment. I've always wanted to play a dirty little gypsy, and I've dreamed of this day. And then you're in a big budget movie with Bo Derek.
Exactly. I mean, literally, but I haven't gotten to the whole thing of when spring was busting out all over, how I developed.
Right.
I hit puberty.
Right. Between the casting and the shooting, there was a bit of an issue.
Yeah, I mean, if what was initially mosquito bites kind of,
Which actually is probably what that movie was looking for anyway.
I woke up one morning, I couldn't see my feet.
And they were like, wow, we really hit the jackpot with this casting.
It's just crazy, how that whole thing transpired. But I mean, literally, so discovered by the talent scout, Claudia, she made the phone call to John Derrick. I then had to get a rinse put on my hair so that we could sell me to him as a dirty little gypsy.
Right. Blonde gypsies on first part,
exactly. So we did this photo shoot. It was a sort of a Lolita-esque, interesting kind of. It was really cool pictures. This woman actually was quite gifted, behind a lens. And he's like, yeah, she looks like she could really pull this off. Let me meet her. And I went up to the San Ynez, Santa Barbara ranch that they had there with 1 million horses, and met beautiful Bo, with
this
her.
was the height of Bo Derek, too, for
my
people
God,
who
it
don't,
was just
she was
crazy.
Considered this is the most beautiful woman ever. Bo Derek's on everything. It's Bo Derek everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I actually, when I was about 12, a year or so before I was met, around the same time, but a little bit prior to, I actually cornrowed my own hair.
Oh, I bet.
And went to school with it with tinfoil at the ends.
That probably went over very well, I imagine.
Let me just tell you, I was always a nerd in school, but that just about, that was actually, I think, out of all of the things that I've done things from putting Nair in my stepmother's shampoo to trying to get rid of her because I didn't care for her too much at the time too. I mean, I've did some crazy things in my childhood, but I think that has to be sort of number one up there when I cornrowed my own hair. Yeah, because I wanted to look like her.
Yeah.
But I didn't have any beads, so I put tinfoil at the end of the.
Yeah, that works. It's very MacGyver-esque.
Yeah, so when she didn't have the cornrows in her hair when I showed up at San Ynez, I was I was a little bit disappointed. Yeah, it was just this amazing mane of blonde hair down to her bum, and she was still amazing looking. But I was like, yo, man, where's the cornrows? Yeah.
But what an intimidating person to have to. Although I imagine you probably were you meeting sort of celebrities or actors and stuff through your parents growing up, or was this still like a weird, intimidating thing?
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those things where there were so many things going on. My parents had just gotten divorced. Environmentally, we were affected by, these storms that were happening on Marina Del Rey. So after I'd gone up and met them, the sea actually came into our house. There was like a major flood, and it was like a big monsoon thing, and we had to evacuate our house. So timing wise, we lived at the Red Cross for literally 3 days because we were homeless. My mother was like, pack your belongings,
grab
and
whatever
we got to
you
get
can
out
get
now, or because the sea it broke the windows through the house. And me, I was already, a little sort of baby Imelda Marcus in the making. I just grabbed, my 50 pairs of shoes, and I couldn't decipher between which ones I'm
going down with the shoes. I can't leave them.
I'm taking them all.
Yeah.
So I was that, and I was putting all my things in garbage bags, just to sort of carry them because I couldn't find any suitcases. And I remember our car was flooded as we were trying to sort of evacuate the garage. And so literally we went from Red Cross to shooting this film, Bolero. I mean, it was just uncanny. It was just you couldn't write this.
That is such a breakneck gap of life experience.
Yeah, and so literally I'd been cast when I was 13, and literally when I got on the plane, myself, my mom, and my brother to Madrid, I think that what the time that had transpired in between was maybe something 5 months.
Yeah.
But between the age of sort of 13 and 14 and having a birthday not too long after I had met the Derricks, a lot happens within 5 months.
Those years, 5 months as a teenager is 10 years for an adult.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was one of these just very, very interesting things where it was just kind of, we had no home, we had nowhere to go, and
why not go to Madrid and shoot a movie?
It's we'll take the job, and we'll take the family, and we were there for we went all over Spain for I want to say 4 months. We were literally.
I
went
believe
to
it.
Seville, to Madrid, to all these amazing cities. Got to see all these incredible bullfights, which really were trying on me because I'm an animal lover.
Right.
But I mean, the movie is about bulls and horses, and getting fierce in a bull ring.
That movie, and they promoted that movie so much. It was one of the first movies because I think people have difficulty now with when a movie's shooting. Every second of everything because everyone's tweeting it and everything, but. Then you didn't get a lot of promotion for a movie before it was even shooting.
No.
And that movie was announcing before we even do it.
That movie got me Conan the Destroyer.
Yes.
That's what people are like, how come you did that movie? That's kind of risque.
Yeah.
It's well, yeah, but you know what? Work begets work. And it hadn't come out yet. And there was just so much hype on it and heat. Because, it was Menachem Golan and Canon, and they were making things happen, and they spent a lot of money on the film.
Yeah.
And, it had a really good cast, and, I actually just watched it prior to doing Electric Boogaloo, prior to saying, yes, I'll let you guys interview me and talk about it. Sure, and I was really pleasantly surprised by that, I mean, obviously the movie has flaws, but it's interesting how time is kind to things that have a sense of corn to them.
Yeah.
And I love corn. I mean, I think that if you're corny, you're cool. To me, that's what cool is people, there's this irreverence about actually trying to take yourself too seriously.
But there's a sincerity to that movie too. Like
Absolutely.
it's not cynical, or it's not like there's not an irony to it. It's like a very sincere effort, which kind of makes it endearing in a weird way.
Exactly. I mean, the whole thing with the honey and the chic and
it's so over the top, but not. But you get the impression that people making it were not like, we've gone too far. They're like, yes, this is correct.
Exactly.
Because Conan the Destroyer was massive.
A little corny too.
It certainly was. Would you expect that there,
Yeah.
And you're playing a very different role too, because you're kind of like this demure princess.
Yes.
Literal princess in this movie.
Yeah.
And that movie, Conan, was the biggest movie of the year 2 years before that. So that was another, like, these anticipated giant movies of follow-ups to these huge hits to be the first two out of the gate. That's going to be kind of intimidating and weird, and also sort of tainting your expectations for the rest of things that you're doing.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think, because I was so young, I think, I was actually having a conversation last night with a couple of friends of mine about, just thematically, we were talking about the Feldmans, the Corey Feldman and
the two Corys?
The two Corys,
Corey
yeah.
Haim, yeah.
Yeah, and somebody had made a comment about, what one of them, the living one, the one who's still alive, the Feldman's still alive, and how you take on a certain persona, and he made a sort of comment saying, if you want to have that kind of persona and walk around with that kind of personality, and I sort of got very protective suddenly and said, but you don't know, first of all, you don't know why that persona is there. It's like going to boot camp and having to find a way out of the military when you're that young and you're not necessarily thrown, but for whatever reason you have entered the workforce. It's sort of like Oliver Twist, like Fagin's.
Yeah, and not a normal workforce. Like, you're not working in a bakery or shop. Like, this is a millions and millions of dollars of artificial weirdness now that you're thrown into as work.
Yeah, and there's just as much pressure on you as anybody else, if not more.
Yeah.
It's like, can you deliver? Can you get there on time? Can you say your lines? Can you stay focused and centered? And let us not forget, it's the people-pleasing business. You need to be able to take direction at the drop of a hat and make the adjustments accordingly.
And understand what they're asking of you, too, especially which is really difficult.
Yeah, so, I mean, the key at a very young age to the thing that if you can pull it off is to have a sense of knowing who you are and really fight for that as much as possible. And I think if you don't have the capacity to do that, not that you don't have it in you, but sometimes, things are just moving too quickly.
You could get yourself kind of could get lost.
Yeah.
Like, so many people don't have a sense of who they are up until their 30s and stuff.
Absolutely.
So you're having to be like 12, 13, 14, 15 and have that in order to have the defenses to be able to deal with that larger than life world is rare and probably really difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I think about people like Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney.
Yeah.
And I was like, watching this, I'm so sad that they're both not with us anymore, and they both, since passed. But, I know Judy Garland died a lot sooner than Mickey Rooney. But I remember really seeing him kind of as a cantankerous kind of little dude who was just like, this goddamn business.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He was like the quintessential, like, jaded child actor at 95 years old, which was very, very weird. And, it was such a weird thing where you're like, he never, not moved past that, but he never became a different adult almost. He kind of got a little bit stuck.
Well, that's the thing is, I mean, again, that's the challenge. It's finding that balance, that irrespective of whether you have been on the journey of being, starting off as a child actor, I mean, or not, I think we're all striving to find that balance. It's integration, with everything that we do and when we come across and, all the decisions that we make in terms of like, is this going to be good for me? Is this going to call upon my strengths or my weaknesses?
Right.
And you have to be discerning enough to be able to have an epicenter to check in and go, hey, is this is this good for me? Can I take a deep breath on this decision?
Yeah.
Is this sitting well with me?
I don't want to make a
now?
rash thing. Yeah, I mean, and that's the kind of thing that like kids have to do anyway. Except their decision might be like, do I do intramural basketball? When yours is like, do I have to ride a horse with Grace Jones? That's a little bit higher, weirder stakes that are like, if you go the wrong way.
Interestingly enough, I mean, not that I'm comparing myself to the two Coreys, but they started like 7,
very young,
6.
Yeah.
There's a huge difference between starting at like that age and starting sort of like
post-puberty, basically.
Post-puberty, because I think, in post-puberty, after parents have just gone through a divorce, for me, how I think acting saved me is that, that was going on, right, alongside of, my career starting to sort of, the genesis of my career starting to happen, and being very fortunate and, having a sort of fairy tale scenario come along and some talent scout, which is like a one-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Like the Schwab story.
Yeah, exactly. And I'd done a McDonald's commercial prior to that, so I had an agent, believe it or not.
Right.
I was Tony Kelman, I seem to remember. And so I'd been going, I had had a little bit of experience, not only in school plays. I'd played Marion the Librarian and the Music Man and had to stuff my bra because I hadn't hit puberty yet at that stage. But
many of us did.
I had a little bit of a knack of the business, but I just hadn't really decided if I kind of really wanted to go for it. So in certain ways, I'd already started to explore it, and then in other ways, it kind of started to come to me. So I was sort of somehow drawing it to me. But by the time Bolero and Conan happened, I kind of didn't have to think about what was going on in my life. I got to escape.
It was a nice distraction.
It was a lovely distraction, and it was a fairy tale, really. And it wasn't until I hit about when I started doing roles at about 17, 16, 17, 18, where I started to, have emotional scenes and have real tears.
More grounded.
You would personalize it, right, in terms of like my own life. So I was sort of ready to connect it to my life and say, okay, I'm going to actually really invest in this because this speaks to Olivia rather than I'm in a fantastical.
I'm a princess in a world of fantasy.
And again, another kind of complete kismet thing that was like obviously part of my destiny. I used to paint princesses. They would draw. I used to have French nannies. One was called Marie-Annick, and there was one called Beryl. She was Scottish, but I mean. She'd be like, "What do you want to do today, Olivia? Shall we paint some princesses? And I'd be like, "Yeah, let's paint some." And quite a few of these nannies were good artists, and then subsequently I ended up playing one. At 14, it was just. Crazy.
That's a huge budget movie with all of the resources of old Hollywood.
Yeah.
While it was
Richard
still at the
Fleischer,
tail
Jack
end.
Cardiff. I mean, he shot, the African Queen with Katharine Hepburn and Humphrey Bogart. I mean, I didn't even know who these guys were. Like, what a complete legendary veterans they were.
Well, why would you though? Too. I mean, in a world before you could look that stuff up easily, but you really got to in a unique place and time where you got to experience those guys who had kind of been there since the beginnings of Hollywood, making a movie the way that was kind of going away.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a great way to get introduced to that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I can't imagine having to act opposite Grace Jones at her most Grace Jonesiest.
Such a rock star. She's
terrifying. But larger than life, I don't even know how you would handle that.
Well, I mean, I don't even know how I handled it either. I've run into her numerous occasions, funnily enough, at like sort of European kind of cafes, where somebody's doing some sort of, kind of they're doing sort of a cabaret or something. It's always something that's kind of smoky and mysterious and quasi-European in LA or New York, and she still looks exactly the same, and she's like, Olivia, I can't believe I'm seeing you. How you doing, girl? But it was such an eye-opener to experience her as such a anomaly. I had seen pictures of her prior to, working with her, but I always didn't quite know if she was a man or a woman.
Yeah.
And I was sort of fascinated and in awe of her, but not quite old enough to really make heads or tails of what it was exactly that she did. I just knew that she was very ahead of her time. It's kind of the same reaction that I had when I first saw David Bowie. You know, this androgyny thing to a child can be quite, ultimately when you get older, you think it's super cool, but when you're, when you just don't understand it and you kind of just want to know what sex the person is.
Yeah, and as a kid, you're trying to figure stuff out and make sense of the world. So when something questions that, it makes you uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Which isn't always a bad thing, but you're kind of like, I thought I knew what was happening and now I don't.
Exactly. Because children like to know what's going on.
They do. You tell them, you give them a little bit of information every now and then. They enjoy that. And Schwarzenegger, who wasn't Schwarzenegger yet quite, Conan was kind of the thing that made him, is literally larger than life at that time.
Oh
and
my
must have just been
God.
like, what is this person?
Yeah. I mean, I hadn't actually. I had just seen publicity on him and seen him in interviews, and I kind of knew he was, kind of blowing up, obviously, since the first Conan movie. Hadn't seen Pumping Iron yet, or the movie that Bob Rafelson directed, which is supposed to be amazing, right? It's on a tour bus or something. Or is that Pumping Iron?
That's Pumping Iron,
okay, but there's another one that he did,
he did Terminator in 84, which was the same year, I think, as Conan the Destroyer, which really is what made him. He did Pumping Iron, and he did a movie in 1975 called Hercules in New York.
Okay.
Where his voice was dubbed.
Yeah.
And that movie is
Look at
insane.
you're such a trivia buff. I love it.
I didn't want to learn all this stuff.
It's amazing that you do, because it's like it's educational to hear you talk about it.
I try. Yeah, that movie's hilarious because he has this guy whose voice is like this that talks. Really? So he's like, why am I here in New York? Like he sounds like George Takei or something, because they're not going to have him in his accent in there.
Right.
It's very, very strange. But it was right after Conan the Destroyer, Terminator, boom, all of a sudden Schwarzenegger's in a huge movie every year.
Yeah.
And people had kind of known about him a little bit from Pumping Iron as this like sort of charismatic thing.
Yeah. And I look back, the way I did prior to saying, I'll definitely do an interview for Electric Boogaloo, because I had to brush up on Bolero, and I was like, oh, you know what, this movie's not so bad after all. It's actually kind of cool, and it's got these funny moments, and and I'm okay with that scene in the bathtub, because I created a character, and I did escape, and she was this just kind of funny little gypsy who is becoming a woman, and she has a crush on a bullfighter, and she's sort of territorial of him, but really wants a family and is looking for love. And so I got her arc, and that was kind of cool looking back at it. But also with Conan, I watched that just recently as well.
It's great.
And it really holds up.
And Sarah Douglas is so good in it.
She's so good.
She had just come off of Superman.
See, I had seen her in Superman. She was actually the coolest actor to me, because I'd been able to personalize her performance.
Right.
So I knew sort of more about her, and I'd seen her on the big screen, which was really cool. Wilt Chamberlain, I'd seen play basketball, but it was hard for me to still imagine him like doing a performance.
Right.
But then I got to meet him. We couldn't find a horse that was tall enough for him that we had to, ship in from Spain, and it took a couple of months.
That's a tall cast. Sarah Douglas is very tall.
Oh, very tall.
Like that's just a lot of big people.
A lot of big people, except for Mako and Tracey Walters.
Right.
They're not so big. They're sort of more in my range, the 5'6".
Tracey Walters is one of my favorite actors in Repo Man. Oh my God! Every line
movie.
in that movie he has. Whenever people are like,
hey,
I don't know.
He's got like this voice.
Oh
it's
yeah.
Like, hi, Conan. Hey, I don't think we really want to go in that
shrimp.
volcano.
He's so weirdly out of place in that movie that it's perfect. Like he's kind of like weirdly New Yorky in this weird sword and sandal movie.
Absolutely. And but it totally aligned with the territory of Joanna Ray was the amazing casting director who cast it, and Richard Fleischer. I guess they knew what they were doing, because with all great projects that are put together, it does kind of all come down to casting, as it did with the Wonder Years. It's like it has everything to do with it. And because Grace was not an actress at the time, she was a rock star.
Right.
And what was an athlete.
Was a basketball player, yeah.
Yeah. So why not stick, a guy in there playing a thief with a New York accent? Hey,
people didn't do stunt casting then.
Exactly.
Which people are used to it now, but that was really unusual.
I
to
mean,
do
I
then.
see that stuff in Tarantino movies all the time now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like he's kind of classically known for that. He
Right.
mixes it up and he keeps it spicy, and so it's kind of like, you know, in a way it makes it, it's going to, I think, give you more of the opportunity to have a vaster audience watch it, because they'll
Absolutely.
identify with every character.
And you have people who are kind of like, I need to check this out because I got to see what's happening here. Wilt Chamberlain this doesn't make sense to me, and I'm interested.
His voice was dubbed, you know, for that film.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Because I have no idea what he really sounds
Take the
like.
girl.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
I think there's a famous line where they say, you know, take the girl, or
Oh yeah, that's someone else.
Yeah.
He I believe, and I'm sure I'll be corrected by listeners. He played a Sleestack in
A
Land of the Lost.
Sleestack?
If you ever seen Land of the Lost,
Oh
the
my
1970s Sid and Marty Krofft show.
Right.
The sort of alligator people. They hired all UCLA basketball players in those suits because they wanted very
my
tall people. I think
God.
Wilt Chamberlain is one of the people.
God. Now, did you say a sleaze stack?
A Sleestack.
Oh,
is
so spell it.
Sleestack. That was the
Okay.
name of the race of these alien, like alligator people
that's
in
classic.
Land of the Lost, which was a terrifying
love-
70s children's show here.
All right.
It was the closest we got to the terrifying 70s British children's shows.
Now, do you mean the Land of the Lost that had dinosaurs in it? That Chewbacca was in it?
Yeah, Chaka.
Chaka.
Yeah,
Chaka. No, I know him.
Yeah.
I know him. I went to Sundance with him when I was
Oh,
like
wow.
a teenager.
Yeah. That show was huge.
Yeah, no, I the
And
land
of the lost. Yeah, that had such a great let's tell you what happened. It has this weird little banjo. It's like something Will and Holly. It's got like the whole, all right, I know what's happening. You just give it the whole
Wasn't
thing.
there like a girl with pigtails who
Yep.
looked like Ellie Mae? from
Yes,
the-
very
yeah.
much. Holly, the young
Holly,
girl
the,
there.
yeah, Holly.
Yeah. And they remade
She
that in
was
the
like
90s.
30 and she was
Oh,
playing
yeah.
like a
Gee whiz, Dad.
13-year-old or something.
The classic put her in pigtails and everyone will think she's 12. That's how it works. It's
There you
classic
go.
Hollywood.
Exactly.
When you were living in France, were you seeing a lot of shows when you were there? Did you watch
When
TV
I was
at all?
living in France?
In France, yeah.
No, I never lived in France. I just went to school in London to a
To
French-speaking
a French
school.
school. I didn't
Yeah.
even know that was a thing.
Yeah, yeah.
So were you
They
watching?
have one in LA, the Lycée Français.
That's just a French-speaking school.
It's just a French school.
I'm
yeah.
so not worldly with
Oh,
these
that's
things.
all right. Yeah.
But when you were growing up in London in the 70s, were you watching a lot of TV or?
Yes, the Bugaloos, the
Wombles.
The Wombles.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the Goodies.
Oh yeah, the Goodies.
And
Spike
you know,
Milligan was in the
Sergeant,
Goodies.
Dad's Army and Fawlty Towers and Benny Hill and just God, they're just so rich.
Oh, yeah.
They're just everything that was on telly was just all comedy primarily. I mean, obviously, it's funny. I didn't actually really watch Monty Python until much later, till I got to
Right.
America, because it was kind of, for whatever reason, maybe it just would have gone over my head more. But yeah, there
Well,
were
the
a lot
Goodies were kind of more popular than Monty
They
Python
were
in England.
actually, yeah, you're absolutely right.
For the whole of the 60s and 70s, most
Right.
people knew the Goodies, and Monty Python was
Exactly.
kind of like a weird culty thing.
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah, they were almost too. The Goodies was just like Beavis and Butthead. It was just sillier. It was more,
Right.
it's more for the childlike mind.
Yes, absolutely. Was there anyone that you had worked with later and stuff that you watched as a kid in some of the British stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I loved, Are You Being Served?
Yes.
Which
Mrs.
I thought
Slocum.
I loved all those actors in that. Wendy Richards, who was in Carnation Street.
Oh,
know,
yes,
In
yeah.
fact, not a lot of people don't know this, I think, other than my dad and my mum. But the role that I played in Greedy, she's sort of like, she's a very Cockney sort of character,
Oh,
and I
yeah.
think I sort of stole a bit of Wendy Richards' sort of,
Because I hear Samantha Fox.
Yes, she.
Yeah.
Oh my God, you completely nailed it. Now that I think about it, I don't know if I was thinking definitely more an actress rather
Right,
than
right.
a playmate who happened to sing.
Sing a couple of
A
songs.
page 2 girl
Yeah.
who could sing
Sam
a little
Fox.
bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Sam Fox. I'm really glad that you're all here. Listen, if you come into the other room, I will take my top off and give you a sneak peek of my next album.
Do you remember when she I don't know what this was for, but some political group in the UK got her to drive a tank as some
Oh.
sort of stunt?
Well,
It was It was. I remember getting footage of it here, and she pops out and she's like, "Hey," and like out of a tank with like a tank top. I was like, when they sing goes, "Touch me." It was like I was like, "What is happening over there? What is going on?" It was something to do with like the Falklands or something.
You've got Marilyn Monroe in the US of A. You've got Samantha
Fox
here in the UK.
Yeah, and so that's my frame of
Fox.
reference. I'm Sam Fox. She was on TV here too. She was on Charles in Charge, and
yeah, that's crazy.
very strange.
Oh my God!
Very
Yes,
strange.
a lot of boys had quite a thing for her.
Yes, that was the. And I remember a lot at the time, and the Cockney accent for most people is a very blue collar accent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here, people are like, she sounds so sophisticated, and she just sounds.
Are you kidding me?
No, they would put her on TV. She'd be like, "It's Sam Fox, I'm hosting TV here," and they were like, "Oh my God, she just sounds like a princess," and it's so because people here don't, they don't know, and they were like, "It's just wow."
And in England, they're like, she's such a bloody wench.
Yeah,
she's
yeah.
such a barmaid.
Not here, not
Yeah.
here. Yeah, so
No.
that's when I saw Greedy. I was like, "Oh, that sounds
Yeah.
like Sam Fox."
Yeah, absolutely. And Wendy Richards, I guess they're kind of the same person to a certain degree, other than
Makes sense.
Yeah, I mean they're of the same. They're like an Essex girl. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Like
Teeth.
yeah. I've got some powder for that, love.
That's like I tried to explain Essex to somebody here because James Corden's is like an
Right.
Essex guy,
Yeah.
and I'm like, it's kind of like if the Jersey Shore people were well educated,
Right.
sort of. I couldn't really.
It's like the Sopranos, except they're not Italian.
Right,
Oh,
exactly,
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing. So you do Conan the Destroyer, huge, and then the next thing I remember seeing you in was Growing Pains, I think, like almost
oh my
immediately.
God, I know, that's crazy.
Which is a huge difference.
It's such a difference. Oh, I'm all over the shop.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing about Growing Pains, aside from the fact that it was like my first indoctrination into sitcom.
Yeah.
I mean, like real sitcom with like Ellen Thick.
Yeah.
sitcom.
3 camera who had just come off Thick of the Night, his talk show.
Look at you.
Yeah, they imported him to take on Johnny Carson from Canada, and actually SCTV, which we'll talk to in a moment because we were just saying how we both love it. They did this
my
great
God.
parody of Thick of the Night.
Does
Well,
he?
they had Sammy Maudlin, who was Joe Flaherty's character, who was doing this Maudlin of the Night show,
Right.
and he was like, "Look out, Johnny, you're going down," because that's how they advertised Alan Thicke's show.
Yeah.
And then it got canceled in like 3 episodes.
Oh my God.
And then they cast him on Growing Pains immediately.
Yeah, that's hilarious. But you know what? He really was, I thought, did a stellar job
Yeah.
on Growing Pains. I mean, he and Joanna Kearns had like major chemistry.
Yeah, and they
And-
seemed parental and nice and knew, like they liked their kids.
Oh, they were parental, all
I
right.
bet, I'm sure, yeah. I'm very sure. But a lot of times on the sitcoms, you'd be like, these parents hate these children. Like, it didn't
Yeah.
seem like a family.
Yeah, exactly.
And they seemed like they, had, like,
yeah, they
these
were like
their kids.
they were still kind of like the hip, cool kind of mom and dad and yeah, they had the rules and the regulations, but they would also cut their kids some slack
right.
when it was time to. Incidentally, Neil Marlin and Carol Black.
Neil Marlins and Carol. Yeah, they worked on Growing Pains.
They were the creators of the Wonder Years,
Yeah.
so they had hired me on Growing Pains, and then literally a year or two after that, I got cast in the Wonder Years, but that, I mean, talk about diverse, writing and show running.
That's a big leap anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, you'd never think of like the creators of Growing Pains even remotely coinciding with the Wonder Years, but
Although I
somehow,
guess at the core, like
Yeah.
they're kind of a very similar show, just in a different presentation.
yeah, I hadn't thought of that. That's true, I guess, because I guess the thing that I've always found challenging to see the correlation is, yes, it's family oriented, but just a completely different format.
Yeah, totally different
Yeah.
and very innovative. And was that the first role that you did with an American accent, the Growing Pains
On
thing?
Growing Pains, I know I played a character that wasn't. She was. I specifically made a concerted effort to play her as a not a very bright girl.
Yeah, you had a real cartoony. You
Yeah.
worked with Mike at World of Burgers.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
were
Wait,
responsible for him getting fired.
Look at you.
Tim O'Donnell wrote that episode. Has one of my favorite lines in the episode where a girl comes in and orders a drink that the name of the drink in size was a colossal. And she was like,
Colossal,
I want a
that's right.
colossal, and you gave me a whoa. And there's some considerable fries. And then your drawer was short, and Mike took the fall, had to pretend that he was still working there.
Now that was Kirk Cameron's
Yes,
Mike,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Now didn't I have a dog? who got bleached.
Yes. And then you had to come. You inadvertently, your character dubbed him in as not working there anymore because you were like, "Hey, Mike, you gotta return your uniform."
And I had like this kind of
it was a real kind of almost Betty Boopy kind of. Yeah,
kind of not too dissimilar from the voice that I had in Really Weird Tales, right?
Yes.
I mean, I think I I mean, I don't know what was going on inside my head, but I think I was starting to become a character actress.
Yeah.
I was sort of starting to think about things I could do with my voice that was kind of different.
But it was really funny, and that was like the first comedic thing that I think I remember seeing you and being like, "Oh, she's really funny," which is very different from Bolero and Conan.
Yeah, very different, very different. Oh, so anyway, your question was that the first thing that I played that was American? And I think after Conan, I did a movie called Mission Kill, which nobody saw, which I played a Hispanic role, another Hispanic role. Like I went through
even
a
that I
series
haven't seen.
Of playing a lot of, well, not a lot, but like 2 or 3. Well, maybe I think I've played like 3 or 4 Hispanic roles where I've actually spoken Spanish. God knows why, but it is what it is. And then I think I did a movie with Keanu Reeves called Flying, where I played like a Mary Lou Retton gymnast, and I got to work with him and Rita Toshingham. I started to do just a slew of American roles: Growing Pains, Simon and Simon.
Oh yes, I remember. So you're like a teenage prostitute or something.
Yeah. And I went on the streets of Sunset. Let me tell you.
Did you really?
And I stood on those streets till a car came by.
Wow, there was. I think again, people forget.
I had to dip my foot in my hand
to see what it was like in that world.
Because I was method.
Yes.
Well, because I had an interesting experience on a film where I was cast, and then it just the chemistry just they had the mistake of not testing the lead actor and I together, and so when we got together it kind of just didn't work. And also the director was very he was a method director, and I knew absolutely nothing about method acting, nothing about Strasbourg.
Kind of
I was just
a
kind of a natural, like, just go with your impulses and your intuition, and that's really an important component of acting. But you start to really take it on as a career, and you do need a toolbox. You need to be a technician about it. And so at that stage, after that experience didn't really work out so well, I said to my mom, drive me to Strasbourg on Melrose. I'm getting my ass into
I need
school.
The tools to be able to do this.
I do. And so I did the whole I am an orange in a corner thing for 2 hours. They would not let you actually even think about approaching doing a scene until you were completely warmed up, which the process of that entailed literally putting yourself up against a wall and, just getting all loosey-goosey on the wall till every little knot had been, wrung out of you.
Or something almost.
Yeah, and then you just kind of make these
what
noises
is this?
in a chair. You're sort of supposed to let all the tension drain out, and it's a little bit like, it becomes like a yoga class then. And then so like 2 hours later, it's like 2:00 in the afternoon. You're like, I'm kind of getting kind of hungry. No break. Okay, now we're going to get into trying to play an epileptic. You know.
So all the sort of parodies you see of that seem fairly accurate then.
Yeah.
Was it helpful though? Like, did you think like, oh, this I can use this?
Yeah, but it's so funny because I ended up working with that director on the Wonder Years, so everything kind of comes back full cycle.
Yeah.
And the next time I worked with him, I was sort of really. I was in a very different place in terms of my art and my training and I mean it was I definitely come to another plateau and it's just that's kind of how life is. It's like things come back around.
You kind of got a second chance to prove yourself.
Yeah.
You kind of go, I can do it.
And it was funny because he kind of had to prove himself by the time he got on to our show. But
you're like, we can close this chapter now.
Yeah,
we're good now.
Yeah, it's just also ironic. But yeah, so I got a perm that year for the first time, and that was the year that Conan the Destroyer came out. And I remember, I had a boyfriend at the time who's a lovely hairdresser who is quite a bit older than me, but I had a huge crush on him, and he ended up taking me to the premiere, and he'd had permed my hair, and so it was there was a lot going on. It was a very exciting time, and
that was a big premiere. Did you do like Man's Chinese?
It was the Man's
huge,
Chinese, and that wonderful film critic, the one with the glasses and kind of the really short hair.
Roger Ebert. Rex Reed.
No, it was neither of those two. He was very small, had kind of a almost looked like Bob Balaban, but I mean in terms of stature, small and like kind of bug eyes. But
I'm trying to think of who it could be. Leonard Maltin.
I think it was. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my God, you are good.
I was like beard, Bob Balaban, Leonard Maltin.
It's amazing, yeah. And I remember him interviewing me and him giving me a very nice review, and yeah. So it was at the Man's Chinese, and
that is the most Hollywood thing you could possibly do
for you. Yeah, for like your almost first premiere, to have it be at that place. I was very, very nervous, and there was a lot of press there and all of that, but I got through it. And I remember Maria and Arnold at the after party with Raffaella, and there was a lot going on in the world of filmmaking for the De Laurentises, because they our film had to come out first before they could actually finish post-production on Dune, because it had gone so immensely over budget.
Done in Mexico City, or shooting it, right?
Exactly. And I remember they had this after party like on Rodeo Drive at some really kind of swanky place, and Maria and Arnold were greeting everybody at the door. How you doing?
Yes, welcome. We've done it.
Drink,
Man, because De Laurentiis had then right after Dune, they built their like North Carolina studios, and then basically just worked themselves out of business, and they sold off their Rome studio and all that kind of stuff. Like they never really recovered from Dune.
Unbelievable.
And that was one of the first things I remember where like you were seeing in the media. The behind the scenes stuff would be written. They never did that before. You would see like some Hollywood, like in the 60s, they would have those rumor mags, but it was like following the production was a kind of a new thing then. So it was weird to see the sort of, the behind the curtain stuff was very strange.
Very strange.
So you do Growing Pains, which again, I remember watching that and being like, I think that's the girl from Conan, which seems like such a weird thing to be like, no, not... It couldn't be, I mean, it wasn't quite as weird as if like Grace Jones showed up, but it was still a little, which would have been cool, but was still a little strange. And then I think Really Weird Tales was the next thing I probably saw you in.
Right, because I'd done a film called Bullies with Jonathan, gosh, I'd be embarrassed if I can't remember. It's like Canadian, lovely guy, wonderful actor. Paul Lynch was a director who I had done Flying with. The movie with Keanu Reeves and Rita Tushingham, and that was like my first starring role, and I think I was 16. And then I did a movie with him and the same writer again called Bullies, and that was released for Universal, and it was kind of a violent movie, and I had 3 brothers who were bullies, and they kind of, beat me up a lot, and it's like a boy finds love with an abused
right. It was one of those revenge
girl.
kind of movies.
Exactly. Yeah. I ended up in the back of a pickup truck in one of the scenes with with a shotgun.
Oh, nice.
Having to kind of take retribution out on my brothers, or really for the mere fact that I had to protect myself. Yeah. So. Yeah, what fun roles.
That's a heavy thing, like, because knowing you're so inherently comedic and fun that out of the last 6 roles we talked about here, one of them is a comedy, and the rest are pretty heavy action or drama stuff. Like even in Simon and Simon, like you have a scene where it's like,
did you see that?
I've seen that. Oh yeah.
Oh my God.
It was kind of a rip from the headlines. In that movie, Angel had come out. You're like a teen prostitute by night, high school student by day, and I think it's like. One of the teachers is actually like a secret pimp, kind of incorporating the girls, and you have this like standoff where you're gonna kill him, and it's like a very heavy.
Yeah, it's very De Niro-esque.
Yeah,
and
it was like
I lose my shit. Yeah. No, well, actually, that I did lose my shit. That's when I actually started having a real acting experience. Like there was no smoke and mirrors. I just was really starting to kind of like. Let things settle and allow myself to kind of like personalize, bring more of myself into my work rather than my take on what I thought a character would do.
Right.
So like literally have the lines come completely viscerally through me and let the emotion be real. And I remember that when the emotion, when the levee broke,
Oh, you are on a boat in that scene.
Yeah, exactly. I was, and I had a gun in my hand, and I started talking about, you know, as the character, well, as myself playing the character.
Right.
So that's the difference. It's not as the character. What the difference was in this scene and this particular juncture in my craft, it was like I was allowing myself to talk about what was going on.
What the character was experiencing.
Going viscerally through me rather than the opposite way around. And it was like an epiphany. I suddenly thought, oh, wow. And I'm just sitting here like breaking down in front of the whole crew and these actors, and there's a camera rolling, and it was like everything started to go into slow motion.
Right.
Warp speed.
Right.
And
You're like, this is how it's done.
yeah. And then they're like, that was great. Can you do it again?
Which is such a weird day at work. Like, the more you break down, the more they're like, perfect. You went off the rails there. Great day at work here, which is very, very strange.
Exactly.
But were you like, I something broke through and I kind of get it now, but I still would rather do comedic. Not that Wonder Years was totally comedic, and your character, for the most part, was the dramatic one.
Yeah, they gave me a lot of, the bittersweet stuff. They
Yeah.
gave me stuff. I mean, I remember there was one scene in Brightwing where it's such a really touching scene where, you know, Karen runs away. And,
Yes.
And, you know, you don't know whether she's gone to Woodstock or where she's gone, but obviously Norma and Jack are terribly perturbed, and Kevin's really perturbed, and he has a lot to say about it through the narration. And then I remember shooting that scene, and Daniel Stern, who's just such an amazing actor and such an amazing actor's director, he was directing that episode, and by the time we got to that scene, he's like, we have no dialogue, nothing's written, but you know, by this stage we were into sort of season 2 or 3, so the characters were all really fleshed out.
Right.
We were all confident in how we were delivering, and so we just did an improv, and luckily I had stuff to fall back on from the standpoint that you know, at that stage I hadn't actually been born by the time the show took place.
Right.
Yet we were shooting it in the 80s, so
It was always 20 years behind where it was airing, I think.
yeah, and so I had educated myself through reading letters from Vietnam, and there was this incredible videos from called The Life of the 60s. It was like from 60 to 70.
Oh, yes.
And they covered each year, literally step by step, what happened with propaganda, you know, how things were, music, who was president, who, you know, what was going on politically, what was going on, you know, with Abby Hoffman and, you know, the Chicago
Weather
7.
Underground
just
and all that.
everything, so that I had that summer after I'd gotten cast in it to really just saturate myself like a sponge with every possible just culturally, you know, to really get it under my skin and let it all percolate, and it did, and there's a reason why you do actually need to go and be a technician about your acting, because when you're doing research, you have to be an archaeologist about it.
Especially then, where you can't just Google it.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not only acting a character who grew up in a different decade than you, but it's a different country, which the whole show is about, the sort of change in the culture in America, which is a subtle and very different thing. And when I look at, you know, England after World War II and America after World War II, they're totally different.
Oh, completely.
So you almost have to unlearn what you know about that time and kind of jump into a completely different head.
Like I feel like I know absolutely nothing about European history in hindsight now, really, because I've lived in this country since I was 9, and so, you know, and I think I'm so grateful that I had the opportunity to live in Taos, New Mexico, a place where Easy Rider was actually shot.
Right.
And the residue of the 60s hadn't really left by the time we got there. There were a lot of people, you know, still living in underground houses, and there were a lot of hippies there still, and it was the 60s were quite clearly over, and had been for, you know,
for you, maybe.
Not
for them.
Exactly. Exactly. You know, there was like a pregnant woman who was like, you know, in her 50s walking. She's just, every time I looked at the woman, she'd just get older and older and more pregnant. It was hilarious.
You're going to have this baby eventually?
Yeah. And, you know, and Dennis Hopper lived in Taos, New Mexico, which was really cool. And Dean Stockwell and Neil Young and all these really cool people. So I got the tail end of this Americana place, which I think really affected my capability to play Karen in such a
Right.
bohemian way. I mean, I remember, yes, of course, it came up, the fact that I was English and I was playing, a quintessential American teenager on the quintessential American TV show. Why would they cast an English girl? Well, first of all, they didn't know I was English until I had actually been hired for the job, and I showed up as myself,
And they were like, "Stop doing this voice. Come on, you can do your,
they were
your
like,
real accent."
why do you have an English accent right now? You're not from England. You're from Ohio, and your dad grows potatoes. What's going on?
That's
I was like, no, actually, this is the way I speak. What do you mean that's the way you actually speak? We just hired you for this show. You've just got the part. This is not
you
okay.
do such a convincing American accent, though, that I imagine you just drew from people you grew up with, or were you?
Yeah.
Because I mean, now obviously it's probably secondhand because you just ease in and out of these accents. But was it harder then, or could you always kind of just do that?
It's a harder it's hard for me to answer that question, because sometimes I still find it challenging sometimes, and I always have to go back. And then there's times where it's completely seamless, and I think it has to do with how much I'm in my head, which, we get into our analytical mind, and even more so when we become, adults and we mature as adults, it's just part of the course.
Right.
And I think, so we have to constantly do things. Luckily, I try and work on myself enough to know what the things are that kind of can take me out of that place and just free me up. Which is why I like to be around funny people, because it keeps me like such as yourself. And laugh a lot. But because there's been times actually on auditions where I know it sounds crazy, but like when I think an actor will always have to audition, even if they have like the highs and lows. It's just part of it, and you have to have no ego about it. Yeah, but there's still casting directors are like, she's got to come in with an American accent, because she cannot be English for this, and it's like, but they know that I can
pull that off. I did it for a number of years,
and she really should come in American, because it's going to be really confusing for us if she comes in and she's British, and then we have to like
method people
shift the gear
that like they have to be stuck in that accent. Like sometimes I'll see like trying to think of some of the British actors I've seen do this, and I can't think of any offhand, but you'll watch like an interview of them on the set of a movie where they're playing American, and they're being interviewed with their American accent, because they're like, oh, if I don't have it on all the time, it's gone. Like I have to it's either on or off. Like they can't get. So they probably think that it's like, all right, you need to take a couple weeks, get the American going, and then not lose it.
Exactly. I mean, and that's all fine and dandy, and I totally get that, right? And I've actually, I've seen the interviews or read the interviews with Naomi Watts or Nicole Kidman when they talk about, going from Aussie to American, and who knows, maybe that's easier, because Australian is sort of a little bit more, it's like the vowels are a little bit more stretched out.
You'll enjoy this. I had a friend who, a friend of ours married a woman from Melbourne, and my friend who grew up in Boston thought she was from Boston, because he thought the accent
really
sounded Australian, and he was like, "Where'd you grow up in Boston?" She's like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "Well, like, where in Boston are you from?" And she's like, thought she was just doing this weird joke, and then he was getting mad that she wouldn't tell him, and I'm like, she's from Australia. What are you talking about? She's a Boston accent. I'm like, no, she doesn't. And maybe it's slightly. Well, when I lived in England, my Boston accent got out of control.
Really?
And I think it was because I was around like a Cockney-ish sort of.
So give me a little bit of how you spoke. How did you
so
speak?
it'd be like a laugh, or like I couldn't say garlic. I was like Gaelic. And like,
so it became more pronounced.
Yeah, and I think it was just because it was somewhat similar to the sort of regional accents in London-y.
How interesting.
It would surprise me, because certain words would come out with the Boston accent, which usually only comes out if I'm like angry or tired.
I get the tired and the angry thing. Yeah, no, it does come out
but
more.
It was
or
so
drunk.
Weird. Yeah, it's just like you can't mask it anymore.
Yeah.
But that was, for some reason, my Boston accent was the most out of control when I lived in the UK, and I don't know why.
Who knows why?
Yeah, and that
just
weird thing I think that we took from the Irish here, where you'd end hard T letters, like instead of saying 8, you'd go 8. Like it's kind of that like kind of thing, and like that stuff was just off the charts there.
Unbelievable.
No idea why.
Unbelievable.
So Australia, very similar.
Yeah. So I've seen like interviews with Naomi Watts and Nicole Kidman, and they really they can't stress enough the fact that, you know, it's challenging for them to do an American, you know, accent that, you know, don't, you know, they're like, trust me, you know, it's challenging. I've got my work cut out for me. It's like, oh yeah, sure you do. You know, but I mean, who knows what goes through their minds or any actor's mind, you know, and if they say they're challenging, you know, you have to kind of believe them, but ultimately it's, you know, what the ultimate outcome is. But the way I've always kind of approached it, for me anyway, it's not just about doing an American accent. It's where's the character's epicenter coming from? Right. You know, it's like if I watch stuff that I've done, you know, as Karen or, you know, any kind of American character that I've ever played, or even any kind of English character or even voiceover stuff that I do, a Russian character, it's like, it's not, you don't necessarily find the voice first. You find, you know, the way they move and like, you know, what class system they are and like where
is very British, by the way.
Is it? Yeah, exactly.
People here would not even factor in class to a character.
They wouldn't, but it has so much to do with your disposition, and then your disposition has so much to do with how you speak and
absolutely,
and how, you know, I thought it was fascinating. I was watching Ellen DeGeneres one time, you know, when, you know, bless his soul, Heath Ledger is like one of my favorite actors of all time prior to him passing, and after Brokeback Mountain he was on Ellen, and Ellen was like, you know, this thing that you did with your mouth, she's like, it was just kind of really cool. It's like everything was kind of just stuck in there and you kind of was just, there's a lot of tension in there, you know. And he was like, yeah, you know, well, he goes, well, my character was, you know, brought up, he was abused, sexually abused, and you know, he was never allowed to speak his mind or his feelings, and he was shut down. There was a part of him that was shut down, and so there's kind of way that I spoke. It just, you know, it's just the words kind of would come out a little bit more. They'd come out, it was more difficult for the way that they would come out, you know. And I just thought that's so brilliant, and then I completely identified with it, because to me that's where the voice comes. And it's not so much it's a dialect, it's like it's how you're expressing yourself through your soul, and then it just happens to be coming out of this orifice, which is your mouth.
It's how that actor speaks. It's not, you're not doing the accent and then reverse engineering a character around it, which I think is what a lot of people do, and that's probably why it is hard for them to stay with it, because they're focusing too much on the technical piece of, I speak this way, okay, now the character does this. It's, if you go the opposite way, it's much easier.
It's more organic.
Yeah.
And then what's great about it is inadvertently the voice that's supposed to come out will come out, and then you're not in your head about it.
Right.
So it's not like, how can I keep doing this American accent and I have to keep talking this way around everybody, because otherwise if I don't, I'll lose it. It's more, I just need to stay, for me, what I tend to try and go with, because it just works for me, is how can I just stay in the life?
Right. What would Karen say? Not, how would this sound when a person like Karen said it instead, which is a very different thing.
Exactly.
So the thing I loved about that character too was, and it was probably because, you know, the show's obviously from Kevin's point of view, but it struck me as so real that her character was kind of mysterious. You didn't see a lot of her, and was like intriguing, and, you know, I knew kids who had older sisters like that, where their world seemed really interesting and adult, but, you know, when I watch it now, I'm like, oh, they're a kid, you know?
Yeah.
But you were just kind of fascinated. Like, they'd come and go out of the house, and you're like, where are they going in their adult world?
Exactly.
And it was the first time I can think of seeing a character that captured that in a show.
Yeah.
And it was perfect. And
thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. It was so exactly that thing, and it was the kind of thing you don't realize is a thing until you see it and you go, yes, everything else has got it wrong, where they'll give you almost too much of the inner life of this person, and that's not how you would see that character.
No, I you know, that's a huge compliment first and foremost, and I had never even really thought about it until you just mentioned it, and what just dawned on me as you were saying that was, thank God I watched the fabulous 60s, which, like, you know, sort of depicted, you know, what was going on so in such a detailed fashion, from Anthony Luley to Tuning In, Tuning Out, to Janis Joplin. Like, who would have been Karen's inspirations? Would she have liked Jackie Onassis? Would she have thought she was just, you know, an ostentatious kind of, you know, like living the high hog life, or, you know, because clearly she was so opinionated and dogmatic and in her views, and, you know, not pro-Vietnam, and the country at that point in time was split down the middle, and so you know, she ran into challenges you run into challenges as a teenager anyway,
Absolutely.
because your hormones are going crazy and you think you know everything and you've hardly even lived half of your life yet. But socially, politically, musically, just everything surrounding Karen at that particular juncture, and like that the fabulous 60s kind of covered, and then the letters to Vietnam. Incidentally, I didn't know that I was going to get to say that Brian Cooper was killed in Vietnam. It was just kind of kismet that ended up happening in the pilot.
And that's such a gut punch in that pilot. And that was when I saw that, I was like, this is something I've never seen on TV before.
Yeah.
Because it was this sort of sweet, little child romance thing. And then you're like, oh my God, like there's real consequences here. And before that, they had very much separated those kinds of shows. We would get a kids funny thing, or we would get like here's a really heavy, which I think you did was it Tour of Duty you were on as well? You would get a show like that was very much like, it's in the shit, and this was kind of more realistic of this is how it would affect people in real life.
Absolutely.
And it was unexpected but not exploitative. It was kind of just like, that would have happened.
And then it was really well fleshed out, like who they gave the lines to give the audience the information. It was very it just was so well written, and I think that Neil and Carol, especially in the pilot, which is still to this day like one of my favorite episodes, because what they were able to convey in such a short period of time to really to flesh the show out and set it up brilliantly, that you just were left wanting more. Beyond the shadow of a doubt. And obviously, so they really, like my favorite line in the pilot that I got to say was, I'm going on the pill. I just thought you guys should know.
Which is exactly what that girl would do to kind of like piss him off and take a stance of like capture, like I'm an adult and I'm doing what I want.
Right, exactly. Hello. So it's that, and like for me, it's like bookended. It's like that's what I said in the beginning of the show, and what I say in the end of the show is that Brian Cooper just died. You know, and so in a way, they gave me these lines. I had a lot of can you pass the mashed potatoes or the peas lines, but I had a lot of really kind of, though they were short and sweet, they were significant and they were kind of profound. They had like a period at the end of them, or they were
she was more guarded too. Like even just past the peas, that character wasn't so much interacting with the family as almost like coworkers or something, and not involved in like Kevin and Wayne's life very much. Would kind of come in as needed because he happened to live there kind of way. Which is a dynamic you never see in family stuff when that's the actual dynamic of people's families.
Absolutely. And just in terms of like the age gap in between, when you have families that have 3 kids, there's always a black sheep, you know. It's inevitable that one of you is going to kind of get put in that niche.
I was the white sheep in my family.
Oh, were you? I can see that. Who then became very, very black.
That's right, yes. But you need that, but it wasn't a cartoonish version of that.
No.
You weren't like a juvenile delinquent with a switchblade, which would kind of be the normal way they would show the black sheep.
Right.
It was kind of like you're just doing something they don't quite understand.
Exactly.
And I loved about that show is that it was a period show that had a reason to be a period show. It didn't sort of fetishize the era, like look, pet rocks, it wasn't like when I watched that 70s show, which I actually think was a funny show, but a lot of times I'm like, why is this even in the 70s? So we can go lava lamp, like it doesn't have a reason to be. And that show did, because of the social stuff. Like you couldn't have a plot point of the Vietnam death if it wasn't set in the 60s.
Absolutely.
And that made perfect sense. And even if you only saw the pilot and the last episode of that show, you would be like, this is a great show. And that pilot, the ending with that is just one of the most brutal, beautiful summaries of a show. And it's so rare that you get a sitcom with a definitive ending.
It's had such a controversial impact on so many people, that
Just
ending.
People who didn't like the ending?
Yeah, because they didn't. Well, because it's a very honest ending. I mean, look, that's life.
That's
life isn't always happy-go-lucky, and there isn't always a happy ending, as a studio ending.
Right.
But
it wasn't now. Like when I watch shows now, and we're in this age of quality TV, which is good, but so much of it is like, okay, Jesus, how much more is gonna go awful here? It's like everybody's dead. Like it's just
Yeah.
the worst of everything.
Yeah.
And I love that it's not that. It's
Yeah.
when it reveals that the father has died, you're like, oh Jesus. But then they're like, they didn't get together, but it's not like she was killed in a a car wreck. It's not that extreme, and it's just perfect.
Yeah.
I love it.
I love that you love it, because I've so many times, more times than not, had people say, I was just really disappointed with that ending. I thought that Winnie and Kevin should have get together, and it's very split down the middle.
Yeah.
I think the general consensus is that, which is a good thing, because I think
it means they care about the characters.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's like, well, Winnie and Kevin probably hoped they got together too and didn't.
Yeah,
That's how
absolutely.
people are.
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe they did.
Maybe they did later. That's just it. Just ended there. That was in like '93. Maybe later on there was a divorce in the cards. Right before Wonder Years Zone, we alluded to this earlier, was Really Weird Tales, which I talk about it all the time on the show. SCTV is one of my favorite sketch shows, such a huge influence on me comedically.
Yeah.
And you got to be in this sort of post-SCTV weird sort of pilot-y parody of the Hitchhiker, Twilight Zone kind of thing.
Yeah.
With the Flahertys and Martin Short.
Oh, my God. And I just remember the first read-through with the two Flaherty brothers in Toronto. And I had done... And again, I have to thank Paul Lynch. He just hired me and everything. I was like, gosh, it was... I would just, we definitely had like, Mr. Jones, we got a thing going on. He was just like, I was like his go-to girl.
Yeah.
He hired me in Flying, Bullies, and then Really Weird Tales. And like literally all, Cohen, they all like within a 6 months time frame in between each one. And so he directed this, and I was like, whoa, this is kind of unusual for you to be doing just a straight up comedy. But it happened to be in Canada, which the other two films that we had shot prior to Really Weird Tales had been in Canada too. So I was working in Vancouver and Toronto a lot. And so Martin Short, it was like somebody had injected this man with like 1,000 Red Bulls.
Yeah.
And God knows what else. And I knew that character that he played, because he'd been on SNL, right?
Yeah, he was on SNL in '85. Was the last year before Lorne Michaels came back.
Right,
It was
absolutely.
their all-star year.
Yeah, so he played the character with the high pants.
Yeah, that sort of lounge singer, sort of Paul Anka, but also with like a weird red curly wig and just like a weird grotesque guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember doing the read-through, and he was just like electrical. And I could there was just like that kind of thing that Robin Williams has, that certain comedians
that manic
just
sort of all over.
Yeah, just manic. And he was like just getting up off the table. He stood on the table at one stage, and I was like, man, this dude is really going for a big time, and he is going to be hard to hold down. And I mean, I've got to just let it rip if I'm going to keep up with him. And I was playing a robot Playboy bunny. And
as you do.
Yeah, exactly. And I just thought, you remember that scene where he's like, I'm a motorboat?
Yes, yeah. I always wonder, is that a thing he just came up with, or is that in the script? Because I imagine he was throwing out all kinds of craziness.
I remember, I had a bathing suit on, and I turned around to do something, and it was obviously, he was looking at my ass, and and I think that's when he
decided that was what that guy would do.
Exactly. Yeah.
He has just such weird ad libs. Like there's an SNL sketch where he's playing Jackie Rogers Jr.
Yeah.
Who is an albino Sammy Davis Jr. type lounge singer.
Oh my God.
And he falls into it was like a Circus of the Stars parody.
Right.
And he falls into a tiger cage. And right before the tigers maul him, he goes, I have such small hands. It's like the weirdest possible thing you could say, and I'm like, but it makes sense,
God,
That's what I just am so enthralled by everything all the people from that group
and those guys. They're incredible. The Flaherty brothers, and I was so privileged to be part of an ensemble. It was a trilogy in a way. It was so it was Martin and I, and then John Candy was in one of them, and
Catherine O'Hara
and Eugene Levy.
Levy.
Yeah, so. That was just amazing. We shot it in Castle. What's it called in Toronto?
I know I can't think of it, but it's this big Gothic
Castle.
Yeah.
Which I had shot in when I did this movie with Keanu Reeves and Paul Lynch called Flying, where I played a gymnast. So it was like the location, and probably still is, that they rent out to every movie production that's shot in Toronto. But yeah, we shot in there, and it really was like being in the Playboy Mansion. And I mean, just what a unique character to playing a Playboy bunny that's really a robot, you know. Because, I mean, I had to think on my toes with that when I was like, well, obviously I'm going to have fun with her voice and she's going to be a kind of, you know, sexy playmate. But, you know, how can I kind of make her real so that by the time you find out she's a robot, you know, you kind of think, oh, no, I thought she was a real human being. And, you know, that how could he kind of fall in love with a robot? He realizes that he's fallen in love with a robot when he starts to pull her arm off and there's smoke coming out and wires and things like that.
I love how real it plays it though, because it could be taken as a huge over-the-top comedy sketch if anyone else. And that was the thing that those guys did brilliantly, was make these weird, bizarre, grotesque characters actually seem like real people somehow.
Yes, exactly.
And that works perfectly in that segment. It's really funny, and not enough people sort of check that thing out.
No, but I mean, you can't. I think it's still possible to get.
It just came out on Blu-ray actually, but it's not remastered. It's full frame, but it's watchable. Snap. It's watchable. Okay. But it's well worth it. And Flaherty's one of the most underrated comedic actors.
Completely.
I mean, he's so funny. There's a SCTV sketch where he's playing a fireman on like a local cable access show.
Yeah.
And this has to be improv. There's no way that they wrote this because it's too perfect. Andrea Martin's playing this like mousy woman, and she gives him these children's drawings that the kids did of a fire that he put out.
Yeah.
And the first one is like these people just die. They're on fire and their eyes are X'd out. He goes, "No, this is a different fire. There were no bad eye injuries." And then the next one's just this big drawing of like a fireman's face, and he goes, "Jesus, what? Oh, this is one of the Brown twins. I don't know which one it is." And it's so funny. And I'm like, the guy is just hilarious.
Yeah, he's a complete anomaly, you know. What a talent. And I just ran into him not too long ago, and yeah, he's so great. And worked with Martin Short after I did The Odd Couple with Matthew Broderick and Nathan Lane in 2007. I then came back to LA and did, I think, 3 performances of the West Coast Odd Couple, which was Jason Alexander and Martin Short. So we did it at the Kirk Douglas Theatre, and Kirk Douglas came.
Oh,
and
I hadn't
seen him since Greedy. No, but he came, and I got to see him and got to work with Martin again, and that was, you know, it's amazing. I've been so lucky to work with like my favorite actors more than once. I've had that experience with Michael J. Fox. I've had that. I did Spin City with him after he had, you know, contracted the Parkinson's. And I had so much respect for him. Just seeing, you know,
his work ethic is
impeccable, and just what a incredible human being he is. How brave and bold, and how it didn't even faze him, you know, start to, you know, have a little bit of a start to shake.
Yeah, a noticeable tremor for someone who's so in the public eye. Is something that most people. I mean, if you look at the way that Roosevelt handled it, you know, they couldn't let you know that the president was in a wheelchair. You know, it was you just couldn't. And to come out like that as like I have this thing and I'm going to still act. You know, it was amazing.
Yeah.
And still be funny and still not be the kind of thing where you do have people who, you know, you see them do things like when Dick Clark had that stroke and you're like, oh, don't put him on. You know, feel, but you never got that way with Michael J. Fox. It was like, you didn't get this feeling that he had to be doing it. You got the feeling that he wanted to be doing it and was pulling it off well, and that he was like, this is how I have, and I'm still going to be funny.
He has like that James Cagney thing.
Yes.
You know, it's very sort of like 1930s movie star.
Absolutely.
Or, you know what I'm saying? Like he's just, you know, he's a little tyke, he's a little guy, but he's a mensch, and you know, he's just full of gusto, and you know, he's unstoppable.
And he's one of those guys with that their own cadence, and it's always fun, you know, like Jeff Goldblum or someone.
Yes.
It's like the way that they speak is only the way they speak, and they can just deliver things. And Spin City is one of the shows that I always cite as there was like 3 sitcoms in the 90s that were so underrated and hilarious. And like Spin City, News Radio, Mad About You are like the shows that don't get enough credit. Oh my
God.
And they're so funny and hold up. They're really great. Do. I love those shows. So Greedy is another underrated movie. Phil Hartman. Ed Begley Jr.
Bob Balaban.
Bob Balaban, who is, have you ever seen any of the movies he's directed?
I was in one of the movies, The Lost Good Time with Maureen Stapleton and then Armin Mueller-Stahl. Oh, you'd love it. And Adrian Pasdaw and Lionel Stadler.
Oh, Adrian Pasdaw's from Worcester, Mass.
Yeah. Oh, no, really?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
What a coincidence.
Because I love Parents that he did with Randy Quaid, which is super weird.
Yeah.
And even My Boyfriend's Back, which Disney kind of took from him and we wrong, but it's still really interesting.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't even know he directs stuff.
No, he's a great director.
I'll have to check that movie out. I can't believe that.
And he's married to a Dixie chick, so what do you
know? Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, he knows what he's doing.
Exactly.
But I love that movie, and not a lot of people seem to like revisit that movie now for such a cast of amazing comedic actors in that movie.
You know, I
Jerry Burns.
Yeah. Oh, Jerry Burns, Ed Begley Jr. and then there's just everybody in it.
Colleen Camp in that movie?
Colleen, she's like, honey, you were fabulous in that scene. You were just terrific.
That's a very good Colleen Camp.
My friend's coming on set. Her name's, Roseanne Barr. Honey, she's amazing. We go to Bible practice together. Let me tell you, honey.
Did Roseanne Barr come to the set?
Yes, she came into the makeup trailer one day. She couldn't have been sweeter.
Yeah. And
I think that they were just like came to set with her friend, with her girlfriend, and just hung out in the, so unassuming, not anything like the way I would imagine her being.
Especially then, this was at 94. That was when she was in all the tabloids.
Ultra feminine, very, like vulnerable and soft and sweet. There was nothing harsh about her. It's funny how sometimes people have TV personas, or they're known as certain characters, and you're assuming that they've taken parts of themselves and just kind of tweaked them, and then that's become who they are on television. But she wasn't that way at all, so I really liked meeting her. But so that film was really amazing to work on. It's funny, I feel like I agree with you to a certain extent with Greedy, but yet lately I don't know if it has to do with the fact that Kirk Douglas is almost 100.
Yeah.
And God bless him. I mean, I'll take that age and a bag of chips if we were to last that long.
He's like in his 80s in that movie, and is pretty spry.
But so I think it's kind of catching on that it's kind of like a sleeper, where people seem to, also because of the cast and the fact that, Phil Hartman's not alive anymore, and God bless him. He was just such a one-off, just such an anomaly.
Brilliant, and I've never heard a bad word said about him.
No.
He was just always watchable, and he's playing an absolute, just a complete dick in that movie, but is so still likable because he's so good at it,
Yeah.
And the other thing I love in that movie too is that your character, when you first start watching it, you think it's kind of a shallow, like almost like a Benny Hill type character,
exactly.
And then they flip it in a way that makes your character the sort of the heart of the movie. It's so well done. It's so well done. That is a movie, if you have not seen, rediscover. And actually, in Clean Slate is another movie that I think is worth rediscovering.
Mick Jackson.
Yeah, with Valeria Golino. She's like, baby, I cannot believe, because
we're friends.
Yeah.
She's like, baby, I just heard that you got the part in Clean Slate for the other part, not the part that I'm gonna play, but the other part.
I'm like,
I love her.
I said I went up for your role, but
she said, no, baby, I had already been offered it. You were not gonna get that part.
That was post Rain Man. I think that was like her first role after Rain Man.
I think you're right. And I remember her and I driving to the read through, and she's like,
baby, we're stuck in so much traffic. We're gonna be so late. Baby, I'm gonna call Dick Zanuck and tell him.
It's like they can't do the movie without the two of us. That's why it's good to carpool to Clean Slate.
Exactly.
But again, these SNL people, you get like Martin Short, Dana Carvey, Phil Hartman.
Yeah.
You're getting to sort of act in like the last great generation of these people who came from a totally different world of the groundlings and that sort of training. And like Phil Hartman had led a whole life before he even started doing comedy.
I know.
He
that's
designed Yes album covers and was
really.
Yeah, he
oh
designed.
my God.
I think Yes's second album. He was a graphic designer.
Incredible. And, so he was like one of those kind of prog rock artists getting it. Again, it's always astounding to me, and not surprising, the correlation between music and comedy.
Right.
It's just like there's just total unconditional love between musicians and comedians.
And it's timing,
they get each other.
Like Chevy Chase played drums in a version of Steely Dan.
Well, see, now that that I get because I've been to a Steely Dan concert and there's a lot of Hawaiian
yes,
shirts.
there definitely is. There definitely is. It's like
Especially
Jimmy
in New
Buffett
York.
for people who don't
They're
want to
all
dance.
lawyers. They're all like lawyers
I
and
cut
doctors.
loose this weekend.
Yeah, exactly.
Very, very different. So then you're in Spin City. You were on a bunch of episodes of The Single Guy as well, which...
Yeah, I did a whole season, but I did... my most memorable experience on The Single Guy was... playing the kind of the nightmare date, which actually they had offered me one of the other roles, but I just loved the as a regular. But I liked the guest star role,
Right.
which was a name dropping Upper East Side. I was like,
Right.
oh, I could just rock this part.
Right. I've never
I
done
want to
something
get
like this, and I can nail it.
Yeah, I just know this woman. She's like, sharing a cab with her would be such a nightmare, and
Right.
I want to play opposite Jonathan Silverman when he has to. He thinks he actually might have to share a cab
Right,
with
right.
me, and
I want to be that nightmare.
yeah, she's just so righteous and so
Yeah.
oblivious to her own righteousness, and I've met people like that, and that's what why I stay curious about being an actor is that's why I'm a mimic, that's why I'm a voyeur, is that
Right.
I watch people and I just get them, and
Right.
so I'm always looking for the opportunity to go, oh, I'm gonna just savor
Can
that.
I use that thing I filed ages
exactly.
ago?
Yeah.
And if is there a character type that you haven't been able to, that you have filed in there that you haven't been able to utilize
There's
yet?
a
That you're
lot.
like, I imagine, yeah,
There's quite a
I
few.
imagine. Kirk Douglas.
Yeah.
How weird was that having to? I mean, all your scenes are with him pretty
They
much.
were all with him, and I was so devoted to, spending as much time around him, either on the set or just any kind of, conversation that I could have, when he was available, because he just was such a gold mine of information and
Yeah.
such a lovely guy, and he was the first actor to actually build his own production company
Right.
and give actors an opportunity to create their own content and material. He was a pilgrim,
Right.
in his own right.
Yeah, he was one of those
In that
guys that was
regard.
like, I'm Kirk Douglas. This is what I do.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the lineage. I mean, I see it in his son Michael and all of his boys.
Yeah,
They're Douglases, and it's just like being a Kennedy. It's a very
Yeah.
specific
you have that thing. Yeah,
including
you've
the
inherited
cleft
the
chin.
Douglas.
It's not just about the cleft, but
Yeah.
it's the brain too, and the whole outlook. Yeah, amazing. I've never seen such distinctively specific, brilliant close-up work as I
Right.
have with Kirk Douglas. I would literally, I'd have a 5 a.m. call the next day. I'd be wrapped at 9 or 10, and it'd be like, Olivia, it's time to go home now. And I'd be
Right.
like, yeah, I know, but,
I wanna see what Kirk
Kirk's-
Douglas
yeah,
is
I want to
doing,
hang
yeah.
out and just watch him. And, there's certain actors that I just have to give it up for them, and if I have the ability to learn from them, I'm going to take that
Yeah,
opportunity.
you
and
get
he-
a chance to watch them work, and you're being paid for it.
Yeah, and he loved that wheelchair. He really got very recreational with that wheelchair, and he
Race
ran
me.
he ran a couple people over. He's like, "Hey, God damn it! If you're in my way, you're gonna have to pay the consequences."
When you're Kirk Douglas, you can run people over with
Yeah,
a wheel. And people are like, I got run over by Kirk Douglas in a wheelchair.
Yeah, it definitely took me a couple of weeks to get over the fact that I wasn't, I would walk in every day and just couldn't get past the fact that he was Spartacus.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
I had kind of,
Who could, though?
yeah.
I mean, that's...
I was just waiting for him to say, I am Spartacus,
Yeah.
No,
Let's get it
I
out of the
I
way.
am
Yeah.
Spartacus. I
Everybody
am
say
Spartacus.
it, and then we can all move on.
Yeah, it's
like that kind of thing.
That Life of Brian thing. I'm Brian, and
Yes.
my wife's Brian,
Yes,
too.
yes, absolutely.
So yeah, it was amazing, and he was so proud of Michael Douglas, his son, and he loved his wife, and he would tell stories about old Hollywood, and
That's
it
incredible.
was just incredible. He actually, I remember him pulling me in the bowling scene where Michael J. Fox and I have that. Well, there's a scene in the jacuzzi
Right.
that
When he
where you kind
reveals
of get
that-
this
yeah.
sense that Molly is actually maybe she is a manipulator, because you don't realize until the very end that she actually kind of is, a wench with a heart of gold.
Right.
That,
It's like a
in
it's like a
actual,
comedy.
she does have morals, right?
Yes, it's like a comedy structured like a murder mystery.
Right.
Which
Kind of a
is-
bit of an Agatha Christie
Yeah.
take on it. Yeah, exactly. Or it kind of reveals itself. Well, obviously, when he gets out of the wheelchair
Right.
at the very end, and
Yeah.
Molly's across the street waving, and It's like the joke song. Who's the joke
we were
on?
in on it, yeah.
But yeah, he pulled me into the jacuzzi when I got there that day. My mum was there on set with me, and he pulled me into the jacuzzi fully clothed. He like Arnold Schwarzenegger was a real jokester, a prankster, and got a big kick out of,
You got pranked by Kirk Douglas. I'd watch that show.
Exactly. I mean, I was
you just got Douglas.
Exactly.
So then Spirit of 76, we were talking about earlier how that's developed this huge cult audience over the years, and I kind of told you that it was on cable so much. It was like nonstop on cable, and I remember, there was a summer where I think I saw that movie every day. It would be like a different part of the movie.
Yeah. Devo in that movie, and
so
Father
great.
Guido Sarducci, and
Rob Reiner.
And all the people from Mission Impossible, right? Oh,
the
original
Mod Squad?
Mod Squad.
Yes.
And Tommy Chong and David Cassidy and Leif Garrett. And, I remember auditioning for that when I was on the Wonder Years, and they definitely wanted me to play it English, and it's funny, that was just a great experience up in San Francisco, and I remember taking a cab ride from the airport in San Francisco with David Cassidy to this like little hotel, this little Victorian-esque hotel in Oakland.
That's like a contest girls would have entered in a teen magazine in the 70s.
Exactly. and I remember everything about David Cassidy was just I had remembered him from the Podgers family, from reruns and what have you, and so when I met him, he'd brought these. He's like, I brought my own wardrobe, and I was like, really? He's like, oh yeah.
That's a very good David Cassidy.
I mean, you want to see my boots? And like pulled out these like 7-inch
the
heels,
silver ones that he comes out of the thing.
Yes,
with,
those were his.
Oh wow.
And he's a really shrewd businessman.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Sean Cassidy too. Like the two of them, like with moving into like the production stuff.
Oh
and,
yeah.
The directing, and like they really kind of got the business a long time before other people kind of caught on that you could move into the behind the scenes stuff.
Absolutely.
Which is pretty shrewd.
Yeah, he told me a lot of stories about touring in Japan and
as doing music and
as David Cassidy.
Wow.
And how beloved he was.
I bet.
Yeah, I mean it's amazing. I mean there was this time and a place where he was like Elvis.
He was the biggest thing in the world.
The biggest thing in the world, and so pretty and handsome, and so it was. I thought it was really great that he got that it was satire, and
he was in on it.
He was totally in on it, and Moon Zappa was also in that film. It was just such an amazing assortment of just great people, an assembly of great people. It's
kind of shocking for a movie, because if you've never. A lot of people haven't heard of that movie necessarily, and I recommend it to people often, and they'll be taken aback by all the people in this movie. And they're like, how did I not know about this movie? Isn't Rob Reiner? He's got a shirt with the Constitution on it.
As an Est.
Yes, Est, which sounds like the method class.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like a cult kind of.
Very much.
Yeah, you can't get up and pee.
Yes, yeah.
Which is kind of what I need to do right now.
All right, well, we'll wrap it up. I'm sorry. I know I'm taking way too much of your time.
No, not at all.
So we didn't really talk too much about your musical stuff. Your record's great. But I always ask this of musicians, do you have a favorite TV theme song? Is there one that just like is like, I love this song?
Oh, yeah, the Jeffersons.
Moving On Up?
Yeah.
That is a really good one. I love... Speaking of The Odd Couple, in the town that I live, there's a little theater, and they did a version of The Odd Couple that Sherman Hemsley was in.
Oh, okay.
And my dentist...
Yeah.
Every time I go in there, because he knows that I'm in the entertainment industry, he's always like, I fixed Sherman Hemsley's crown. And I said, he had to fill out a medical report. I saw how old he was. And I said, you look great. And he said, hey, man, black don't crack. And I'm like, you've told me this story every 6 months for 8 years.
Oh, my
And I have to pretend every time that it's the first time.
Yeah,
but I'm like, all right, well, these tools may have been in Sherman Hemsley's mouth. And that's very exciting.
Oh,
that's my brush for stardom.
That's hilarious.
Is there anything you watch now? Are there any shows that you're like completely addicted to?
Yeah, I love The Affair. I've been watching that a lot, which isn't a comedy, but my gosh, Orange is the New Black, and I love gosh, what is it?
American Horror Story.
American Horror Story, and the new one.
Yeah.
Gosh, I'm like having a blank, but there's a lot of stuff that I've obviously it's not as new as some of the other stuff that I'm watching, but love Modern Family and I love The Big Bang Theory, and I love a real assortment of
it's a very wide breadth of stuff.
Yeah, but I mean it's all really good, and the barometer, the pedigree of all those shows to me is like really really on the money. I've been I like Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
I think it's really cool because it's an escapism. It's a sense of, I like that it's period, but I also like that they have kind of Gaelic tongues in it. And
it's for Conan the Destroyer.
Yeah, it is. And I think, and I feel like anything that's a departure from reality for me is disarming.
Nice.
Yeah. And, I love, a lot about there's cool animation stuff out there that I watch too.
I mean, Justice League, where you did a number of voices with Star Sapphire and a bunch of stuff. That is my absolute favorite comic adaptation. The stuff that Paul Dini and Bruce Timm and that Justice League cartoon is just fantastic, and so doesn't talk down. It's not a kid's show.
It's not,
but it doesn't make that mistake of like we're gonna make it gritty and violent, so it's not a kid show. It's like no, it's just really smart and has good stories and characters. Is great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I revisit those shows often and always recommend them. And you do Morgan Le Fay and a bunch of really cool characters.
Yeah, I do. I again, it's, maybe that's why I have a different take than most actors do on, is it hard for you to do an American accent, or do you have to kind of live in, speak that way for 2 weeks so that, you can hold on to it. For me, I think voice acting has made me a better actor. It's made me a better musician. It's just, there's a fine-tuned discipline to it, because what you're doing is basically you're being really cohesive and taking all, you're being so specific about the components that actually, that you need to create a character, and it's almost like you just get really lean and mean with it, and it all comes out in your vocal range.
You can't fall back on certain.
No, you're not there with like your mannerisms and it's all about the voice. So you have to like channel a character just totally through your voice box, and it has to be rich, and you have to like hear it. It's all audio, so you have to just like get it, and more importantly, the artist or the illustrator has to like be inspired by what you're doing. That's why you get casters that are like, oh, that voice makes me want to draw and keep drawing this character. I remember when I was doing Tarzan and Jane for the Disney show, Mimi Driver did the voice of Jane for the movie, and I got cast because I was in The Big Green, which was a Disney movie. They then, saw me as playing that role and thought, oh, it's kind of a Mary Poppins, proper English character.
This will work.
Oh, yes, she can play Jane. And, oh, Tarzan, we're going to go swinging on the vine. Look at that gorilla over there. A proper kind of lady, like sort of role, but she's kind of zany and fun and dotty and quintessentially English. And but yeah, it was, for me, there's nothing greater than having a collaborative relationship with somebody where, like with voice acting, for example, you come in with your pajamas, you just walk in and you got your slippers on and your hair's a mess, and you can just kind of show up. It's just your voice, but like you're present, you're ready to go to work, and you got the animators there and they're kind of listening to you. Oh, that's kind of funny. I'm gonna kind of like this is giving me some ideas for I'm going to now send this off to Taiwan for a couple months.
To make it work,
Come back with this is So it's a completely different.
It's like a higher level skill set that you can then incorporate into everything else. And like most of the people that I know who are amazing voice actors, like people like Tom Kenny and Billy West, are former musicians because they're so technical with their voice. And like Billy would be like, and this character lives up in this part of my head. It's like a very specific, almost like physical part of their head that they know the voice comes from. And it sounds like you also kind of do that too. You're like, I know it's a little bit mixed with this nostril and it's kind of comes down through. Yeah. It's so technical.
Yeah. I was talking to Vincent D'Onofrio, and Vinny, please excuse me if I'm giving away your secret of like your fine-tuned chemistry and mixture of what kind of, helped you create Goran when we were doing Law and Order. But I was like, yeah, this character that you're playing, it's like I feel like I know him. It's like it's a kind of two different people. And he's like, you want the secret? And I was like, yeah. I was like, who is it? What are you doing? He's like, it's Christopher Walken and John Malkovich.
Perfect.
And I mean, like what, like two brilliant actors combined into one character, and that's kind of what's exciting about what we do, whether it's voice acting or creating a character that's in front of the camera. You have, when you really start to get free with your work, there are no rules. It's like you and I were having a conversation the other day about doing stand-up, and that, don't limit yourself. You know, when it can really start to be fun, you can really take it and roll with it. And director doesn't necessarily need to know like what you're using in your toolbox to kind of. They
like it or they don't.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's either working or it's not. But that's when it really gets exciting. Right. When you can kind of compartmentalize it, become a technician, then go, I'm going to throw that all away in this time, and I'm just going to try something new. Yeah.
On the flip side, I always hear stories of Nicolas Cage, who always uses a cartoon to inspire his voices.
Oh my gosh!
And have you ever seen
makes sense.
The movie Vampire's Kiss that he's in?
I haven't. No.
It's actually a really interesting movie. It's the guy who wrote After Hours, and it's Jennifer Beals is in it, and he plays this yuppie who gets bitten by a vampire.
I was just talking to somebody about this the other night.
It's an interesting movie, but he's really unhinged in it.
He is.
And I remember hearing the director talk, and he goes, well, he showed up on set, and he was doing this voice that he's doing in the movie. And I said, what the hell are you doing? And he goes, oh, I'm being Pokey from Gumby. And that's exactly like it's like, no, that's like, okay, Christopher Walken and John, that makes sense. But when you're going, like as a guy, it makes no sense. And then I've heard all these stories of like every role he's like, in this movie I'll be doing the voice of a deputy dog. Like it's like, what are you talking about? And you wonder how much of it he's just trying to mess with you. And I'm like, no, I think you might actually think that was a good choice. There's the dark side of that sort of technique.
You can take it to a whole other level where it's not. Yeah, it's just, I mean, to each their own. I mean, take a little paprika, a little salt, a little, It's
the secret sauce we all have in this world.
Yeah, a little shake and bake.
Yep, works for some people and some people not so much.
Absolutely. the metaphors of cooking come to mind when I think about kind of, putting together a character. But yeah, it can be, Vincent D'Onofrio is a great example of just an actor that I think is not only underrated but just completely brilliant. But he manages to reinvent himself every decade. I mean, he's not going anywhere.
No, and in Daredevil he's amazing. And
Full
that
Metal
voice is
Jacket.
so distinct.
I mean, how can you ever forget him from that?
Yeah.
And you could just continue to draw a straight line between that performance and every other performance, irrespective of the fact that it may or may not be Stanley Kubrick, because obviously he's not with us anymore. But his barometer of work is always consistent.
Yeah.
I mean, his
play
approach.
Abby Hoffman? Steal this movie?
Yeah, and Elvis.
Yeah.
Apropos to your shirt.
I'm wearing my Elvis shirt.
Very
nice.
nice.
I mean, just so wide. I mean, he's even great in Adventures in Babysitting, where he's playing the guy who's basically Thor.
Yeah.
In a little scene, he's one of those guys that just you go when they show up on. And I'm not just saying this because you're here. You strike me as well. When you show up in a movie, you're like, yes. I love it when this person shows up in a movie, even if it's a small role like Wayne's World 2 or something. You're like, oh, this makes it so much better. Because I always like when this, and he's one of those people too. Like no matter what the role is, you're like, I'm going to enjoy this because they're, but it doesn't take you out of it. You're not just like, oh, there's Vincent D'Onofrio. You get that he's a character, but you also kind of, it's almost like a brand recognition where you're like, you're not going to steer me wrong. I know that you're, so it's very comforting. And nice
very, very comforting. And that's great as an audience watching a film because it's disarming. You can relax.
Yeah. And then just enjoy it.
Yeah. I loved him in The Salton Sea as Pooh Bear.
Yes.
I just thought both he and Val Kilmer were so great together, and Brad Wong and all of the people in that film. I just loved the film. It was so dark, and I felt like I'd never taken meth before, but I felt like I had taken it being in that movie.
It's like now that's all we need. We need just the movie. Maybe if they showed that movie to kids in high school, we'd have no more of a meth problem.
Exactly.
They're like, done it. All right, let's move on.
Yeah,
we got this
absolutely.
experience. Thank you, Vincent D'Onofrio.
Amazing. But yeah, it's crazy to think that you can pull off a character by playing two other actors.
Yeah. Yeah, but most people would never know that.
They wouldn't, but it's what made his character so idiosyncratic. Everything down from the rhythm to, he'd kind of talk like this, right?
Yeah,
and he'd have this rhythm he'd pull back, and the way he would just think and take pauses and
but a less skilled
intense
person that might come out like Shatner.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Exactly.
And he's not doing an impression. He's like distilling and sort of taking the essence of it and making it something new, which is really hard to do. But when you pull it off, is perfect, and that's great.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to take your whole night up. I really love talking to you. Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, you're so welcome. I just had the best time. I feel like I've had like a walk down memory lane, but also been able to talk about stuff that's important to me, and you're just
that's ideally what I go for.
fun interview, and I never picked up the TV Times, but maybe we'll do another one.
Yes,
of these
we'll have to do a part 2 at some point with the actual
about
TV Times.
Battle of the Network Stars.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll tease part 2 with that.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ken.
Oh, baby, I see you in my TV set, yeah, baby, I see you in my TV set. I cut your head off and put it in my.
So there you go. As I said, a very special Friday episode of the show. I know it's summertime, so you guys need more content to listen to when you're driving to the beach, because who doesn't like to blast a podcast on the beach? That beats Van Halen any day. Is that what people listen to at the beach? I don't know what happens at beaches these days. But anyway, Olivia is so great, as you very well know, having just listened to the episode. She's got a bunch of records out as well. She's a fantastic musician. Not TV is a record from a couple years ago, and it's sort of appropriate for the show that I really, really enjoy. She also does a podcast every week called Every Friday with Dan and Olivia that is really fun. You should check that out as well. And as I said in the show, it's always nice to see her pop up in things. So you'll see her in more things, or go back and revisit some of the things that we mentioned in the show. I was surprised many things I hadn't seen. I actually walked away with a list of things to see, which doesn't happen on the show too often. If you would like to email me about the show, or you have any questions or guest requests or anything like that, you can email me at tvguidancecounselor@gmail.com. We are at Twitter at tvguidance as well. I will put up links to all of Olivia's social media stuff and her website. She's got some great clips of character stuff that she did on there that you will want to check out. It's very funny. And you can join our Facebook page. Just search TV Guidance Counselor on Facebook, and you can talk to other listeners of the show. There's at least 10, and they're very fun, very nice people, so you will enjoy that. And as always, my comedy album, The Vanity Project Volume 1 Hollywoodland, is available where fine digital music is sold, and I still have a few copies up on my website, iCanRead.com, as well. If for some reason you want one of those this summer, I'm not saying you have to. Be nice if you did, but you don't have to do that. It's fine. And as I get more of these episodes of people coming through town, we may get episodes on Fridays. You never know. And my promise to you, the listener, is a new episode every single Wednesday, but make sure you subscribe to the show on iTunes or however you get the show, because we get episodes like this. It's a bonus. It's a surprise on Friday. And if you don't subscribe, you may miss it, and you would have missed this fantastic episode. This is one of my favorites. Absolutely. This is like a top 5 episode out of 200 plus, or however many we've done. I don't know how many episodes I've recorded in the last 2.5 years, but it's a lot. It's a lot. And this one is right up there. Just fun. And there's so many things we didn't get into here. So I really do hope we end up doing a part 2 at some point. And before you send me an angry email for not mentioning, Crash Course or some of the other stuff that she's done, we'll do it next time. I promise you. We need to get into the heart of Crash Course and Battle of the Network Stars and all that kind of stuff. So please join us on Wednesday for a brand new edition of TV Guidance Counselor. The Wonder Years
Mr.
cast.
Trivia buff. Now, did you say a sleaze stack? Robot Playboy Bunny? Honey, you